Hello and welcome to Domed Podcast. We are your hosts, Mistress Gemma
and Goddess Seraphyna.
Together, we will reveal the art and lifestyle of all things BDSM, kink, and FemDom, sharing our musings and exploring the nuances of the taboo. Thank you for joining. Are you ready to be domed?
Okay. More serious of topics.
More serious of topics. Sex work politics, especially in this recent times of political
unrest,
changes, lots going on at once, that we felt compelled that this was an important topic to discuss and really move forward in terms of timeline of discussion than we were planning. We want to dive into sex work legislation, what's happening in the current climate in the U.S. in particular, but there's a lot of shifts also happening across the world and in Europe with changes in hand of power and who's running the countries, how other countries handle it, and which models are actually keeping sex workers the safest, relatively, right?
Yes.
So we want to start with defining what is sex work. And it refers to the consensual activities where sexual services, performances, or products are exchanged for money. So the exchange of monetary value for these acts and services. And the term was coined in the late 70s by Carol Leigh, aka the Scarlet Harlot, to emphasize agency and challenge the stigma around the work. So it covers a range of activities from my understanding, including webcam, stripping, modeling, phone sex, escorting, sugar arrangements, and professional dominatrices. And let's start off by defining the different legal frameworks that are present across the globe, the main ones at least. So there's criminalization. Boo.
Boo.
So both buyers and sellers face legal penalties, and this is common in the U.S., except parts of Nevada where sex work and I think they call bunny ranches are legal, but that is a very specific subsect and region of Nevada.
Where it is legal for brothels.
Brothels, yes. These brothels or bunny ranches, they call. Example like Russia, Saudi Arabia, and I think most parts of the globe, to be honest, most countries. The Nordic model, also known as end demand. So selling is legal, but buying is not. So those that are criminalized are those that are purchasing the services. It's used in Sweden, Norway, Ireland, for example, and it's criticized for pushing sex work underground when the buyer is then criminalized and punished. There's legalization, which all these have nuances, except criminalization is pretty plain and clear. But legalization is that sex work is legal, though heavily regulated, which often creates exploitative conditions. And this is seen in Germany and Switzerland. Okay. And to go into more of the nuances of like what does legalization cover, these are just a few points and areas where exploitation can be used is these highly regulated frameworks that require sex workers to have to register for one, maybe undergo health checks, and to operate under specific zones or areas. And even though many sex workers avoid registration still due to the stigma of sex work as just prevalent in general, or for privacy concerns, which pushes them into this unregulated, criminalized sector where they lack protection or resources that perhaps some legalization may provide if they don't want to have to put their legal name into a database when we are operating it under aliases for our protection.
Yes, completely.
There's also the concern of increased control by third parties when it's legalized. So this can result in corporations, you know, basically being a big part of the industry where they get profits or they could profiteer over the sex industry. So
Similar to OnlyFans? Or would it be?
perhaps. I mean, I guess, so it can create conditions where brothels and agencies may become the primary legal employers, leading to
Gotcha.
this shift in power away from the independent contractor and worker.
This makes a lot of sense.
And so if they're the managers and business owners profiting from sex workers, then this could possibly limit workers' rights by, one, again, maybe taking large portions of
Profit.
their earnings, setting unfair terms, or even restricting their autonomy or setting rules of how the sex worker can operate.
Yes, completely.
And even more harrowing if the legal frameworks are, like the oversight isn't strict or good, is that sometimes it can provide a cover or front for actual trafficking, where these criminal rings can create brothels and traffic, you know, sex workers from other countries or undocumented immigrants, and create even a bigger problem if the country isn't really on top of it.
Yes.
So those are some of the harrowing limitations from legalization. And then there is something even more different, which is decriminalization.
Okay.
And this removes criminal penalties for all parties involved on both sides, the buyer and the sex worker. And generally these are more supported by sex worker advocates. So they actually can speak to the issues that we come across and also be part of the legislation and what laws or resources that we can actually have to support and protect us. And a few places that this is implemented is like New Zealand and Belgium, but we'll go more into slight detail about where in the world sex work is legal or decriminalized, or the different areas with these different frameworks. But we will specifically focus on some of the current conditions of sex work in the U.S. since, you know, this is closest to home for us. So in the U.S., sex work is mostly criminalized, as we said. In 2018, the SESTA FOSTA law, which was put in place under the Trump administration, targeted online platforms or businesses under the guise of fighting trafficking. But it's actually made sex work more dangerous because now that these businesses are held liable for any activity on their sites that may be trafficking, like under the guise of curbing trafficking, but now it's like anything that's related to sex work, how can they decisively know whether it's trafficking or not? So, for example, social media now has bans on anything that may be related to sex work or what they may deem, and so a lot of us are getting our accounts shut down. Banks are shutting down.
Wells Fargo.
Accounts like PayPal has done that, and specifically the Backpage, those that were around doing sex work prior to 2018 or whatnot, you would know, Backpage was very popular, and this has forced a lot of sex workers into riskier environments where we can't vet potential clients. And so we do have to create even more nuanced measures to try to protect ourselves or get verification, and vice versa, So with the 2025 inauguration, recent legislative developments, and his return into office, there's been some notable shifts that I believe affect us. And we want to keep a pulse on.
Yeah, totally.
So there's the Oklahoma's proposed pornography ban, introduced by State Senator Dusty Devers. So serious. I'm so serious here. Dusty Devers.
The ways in which we can make fun.
SB 593 aims to ban all forms of pornography with penalties up to 10 years in prison for producing, distributing, or possessing it. Critics argue this infringes on free speech and civil liberties. I don't necessarily want to go into a whole diatribe or discussion about that. We could have another discussion, a whole nother episode on pornography and how that's defined and how it's maybe affected and skewed our perception of sex in general.
Yes, would love to talk about that in another episode.
And also how pornography is also great. So there's also the executive order on gender definitions. This one.
So sad.
Yeah. So signed on January 20th of 2025. This order mandates federal agencies to recognize only two biological sexes. It affects workplace policies and access to sex-segregated facilities, as well as a recent personal anecdote from a close trans friend, passports and being able to obtain and process a passport. And they are citizens legally of the U.S., so that right being revoked. And this does indirectly impact sex workers, especially those in the LGBTQ plus communities.
Yeah, I too have many friends that have been impacted by this. I have trans immigrant friends that are needing to go back to their home country to change all of the documentation onto there to then potentially get their visa, but with the immigration laws and that honing down, that not only do they have to go back to their home country to change their gender legally on those documents, but then that's not even guaranteed that they will
could get back.
Yeah, that they'll be able to come back and have that visa. So I know for myself, many
the
loved
direct
ones
impact,
is
immediate impact in my circles,
Yeah.
Okay, so there's also the rescission of affirmative action policies. I can't believe we've gone back to that. So an executive order issued on January 21st, 2025, revoked equal employment directives related to race and sex, prohibiting diversity initiatives in federal employment and contracting.
Yep. And then also all of the disability programs that protected myself while in the corporate world from discrimination over my physical abilities and protecting me against ableism was now revoked completely. So this goes over discrimination on sex, race, gender, and also disabilities as well.
Imagine religion.
Yeah, religion as well. Yeah, it's really, really disheartening because even during the times when I was working where there was prominent sexism and ableism in the space, these programs were the only things protecting me from being able to legally not be discriminated against, and now those
or fight back if you needed to.
Exactly, and now those are completely revoked, so you can be discriminated against legally, which is really heartbreaking for not only sex workers but for the American people as a whole.
So, and that's to say, by the time you're listening or viewing this, a lot can shift.
Yes.
Because a lot is shifting day to day, and it can be very chaotic in knowing what is actually going through, what's actually enact, because that's changing day to day.
Yes.
Relating directly to BDSM and the legal gray areas.
Yes.
So BDSM legality varies by state and potentially even jurisdiction, probably cities. just reading the details. So some consensual acts can conflict with assault laws, but for professional dominatrices, legality often hinges on whether services involve penetration. And from my understanding, for some areas I've read about, any swapping of fluids can be considered sex work or prostitution. Penetration is equated with prostitution, which is just generally illegal everywhere, right? Except parts of Nevada, as we spoke about. And in my understanding, I mean, of course, a lawyer could splice this and split hairs on this, but I think even spit would be considered swapping fluids. And if you get paid for that, I think you could get in trouble, is my understanding. So just even those really small nuances where it might seem more innocent. So talking about international models and what are out there, we mentioned like new decriminalization seems like to offer the most protection and resources. So for example, New Zealand decriminalized in 2003. So it's improved safety, health outcomes, and police relationships between sex workers. And yeah, the police, although, you know, stigma just still persists in general in society. Belgium also decriminalized in 2022 with labor protections like sick leave and pensions.
Oh, wow. That sounds amazing to have access to.
And then the next level is legalization, right? So Germany, Switzerland, it's legalized with strict regulations, although there's some hiccups potentially there, as discussed. The UK, United Kingdom, has partially decriminalized. So a person can legally sell sexual activities privately, but it's illegal to solicit in public. And there are some restrictions around advertising sexual services. Or managing a brothel is completely illegal. Yeah. And I think the definition of a brothel is more than one sex worker in the same room with a client. So you couldn't, like, even from my understanding, yes, is you couldn't double with someone because then that could be considered a brothel.
So interesting. And again, these technicalities, when we will be providing all of these resources on our website, but I do highly encourage to stay up to date independently as well, because like we're talking about on a weekly daily basis, these laws are changing, and specifically with the specification of the legality within that, we will be providing the resources, but we highly recommend doing your own research in that. We'll try to provide as much as we can. But
and also, this is what we believe the interpretation of the law is. So we're not lawyers. We're just sharing what we are uncovering in our research. And so, of course, if we are misguided on any specific fact, please let us know. We always want to try to give the most accurate information that we understand, because for me, being safe and being able to protect ourselves is the biggest thing and the reason why we want to discuss this.
Yes, completely.
So the Nordic model, as we discussed earlier too, like in Ireland, Norway, Sweden, it has increased violence against sex workers and reduced income security. Why, I don't know specifically. I don't have the notes on that right now, but this is what our research has come up with. So where is the safest place to be a sex worker? At decriminalized countries or areas where it's decriminalized. It offers better protection, legal rights, and sex workers have reported feeling more secure and empowered. Although, of course, the stigma just always is there, depending maybe where you're at, what part of the country, and the circles that you may be in contact with.
Yes. And that is something that lightly I'd like to touch on, is that finding your community in whichever place, whether that's online or in person. Stigmas are around, but I feel very lucky. I know Gemma has a similar experience, that you're able to find people that accept and see and uplift and empower you in the sex work, and do not project what the majority of society is able to do.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has to choose their own risk profile.
Yes.
And what they're okay with and what they're comfortable with.
Totally.
You know, for me, whenever I have traveled, I always reach out to a fellow colleague.
Mm-hmm.
And for one, that's just because I want to meet others.
Mm-hmm.
Two, they could obviously point me in the best resources of where to be, the best areas, how to advertise, if that's something I ever do,
Mm-hmm.
as well as at least someone's there while I'm there in case there is a need
Yes.
to know someone, or
Yeah.
have a contact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
So, tech surveillance and sex work in this day and age
Oh,
of
goodness.
innovation technology. So, yeah, I think this is also increasingly something that's coming to the forefront, especially with AI. So, you know, there's digital surveillance and also facial recognition,
Yes.
which it's hard to then kind of parse out with how the accuracy at which it's doing it.
Yes.
Deplatforming on websites, financial discrimination, as we said, bank accounts being shut without notice and assets being frozen and having to work on getting those returned
Ridiculous.
and banned from specific institutions or platforms financially and websites.
Yes.
So AI-driven systems have even flagged sex workers at international borders. I have a personal friend who has been brought into a room twice, 2 different countries, and questioned,
Crazy.
and nothing was found on them, but still, that's scary.
Yeah, it
to
is.
be brought into a room, interrogated, and like, what are you doing here? Are you here on business? Are you here for pleasure? And just having to work around that system. So
Totally.
not to increase fear mongering, but I think the best way we can have less fear is knowing.
Yes, completely. And I do have a little anecdote about the for our audience about safety, specifically interested sex workers or current sex workers, with the exchanging of data for socials. I essentially have been kind of lightly outed along the way of my journey of getting all of my social media and my emailing and all of that all sorted out, that I now deleted, but I had a personal Instagram, and I initially got my Goddess Seraphyna account handle name on my personal, and then I completely wiped it. I got a new phone number, a new email, set up the Goddess Seraphyna account on this new phone, and it, even without providing permission,
Or that you know of?
yeah, well, no, I specifically said that it didn't have access to my contacts, even though the contacts weren't even on this new phone. It still started suggesting me to, I had a classmate from Catholic school try to add my Goddess Seraphyna account. It started suggesting me to my old coworkers in these corporate spaces. So I highly recommend to, if you create a new email and only put that handle name nowhere near your private account, and for a lot of sex workers, I would most likely advise to not have a personal account if there is any way that you are not wanting your old life or specific people that are currently following you on your personal to ever find your sex work account, to try your absolute hardest to separate, because technology is becoming less and less private, and your information...
Tracking data.
Yes, the data is being tracked. So just being incredibly safe, and even with that safety, I mean, you have to have like your different emails logged into different servers so it doesn't cross over. There's a lot of nuance with technology and the data that is being transferred that I really recommend you being as diligent as possible on, and I hope that little anecdote helped provide some thoughts that you may not have had, because I tried my hardest to be as safe as I possibly could. And in my beginning of being professional, I'm learning how hard it is to separate with the way that technology communicates with itself.
Getting a VPN
Yes.
on your devices.
Yes, getting a VPN on your devices is, really recommended.
Or using a web browser that is incognito, or like DuckDuckGo, where they clear all the cookies constantly and stopping any trafficking of like your data.
Oh, I didn't know about that one. What is that?
DuckDuckGo.
Okay. See, learning things every day.
Yeah, and I think a good resource for someone who seems very passionate on tech surveillance and privacy, who's in the industry, is Mistress Faye, or Domina Faye, in New York City.
How do you spell Faye?
Fae.
Okay, perfect.
And she has a blog with articles where she kind of goes into detail about specific things and how to protect yourself. So I found those really nice to get more into the nitty-gritty and technical aspects of it.
We'll also provide that on our website as well.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, like, these laws are kind of shaping our lives and safety as sex workers, and our autonomy.
Yeah.
Well, the lack of laws or protection, too. So, again, decriminalization offers the most protection, but it still has ways to go.
Yes.
And the fight for recognition and respect and destigmatization is definitely far from over.
Yes, especially in such puritanical cultures. But with that, a more serious episode, but again, I hope that these resources and kind of the frameworks, I know this is something that I was not knowledgeable on when I began my journey, and also with this current climate that Gemma and I are really passionate on, that we want to provide as many resources to our audience as possible.
Yeah, and there's constantly more stuff we're learning.
Yes.
Yeah, that's uncovered.
Yes.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you for joining our podcast. Did you enjoy being dommed? Like, subscribe, and add your worships in the comments. Follow us on all socials linked in the bio below.